So you come in with chips bought with let's say stolen funds or funds you want to launder. You join a poker table with someone who helps you, and basically you lose all your chips to that person, who then collects the chips, withdraws them, and moves on. But you've also transferred the funds over to the next person, who then can claim that I've just won these in a poker game.
Money makes a world go round. It makes a world go round. Money makes a world go round. It makes...
Welcome to The Laundry, the podcast connecting AML, compliance and financial crime to the real world. Spin the wheel, roll the dice, play your hand. The world of online gambling is all about calculated risk and reward. But now it's the turn of the operators themselves to think about the risk. As of July 2027, they fall under AMLA's new AML rulebook. So is this industry ready to take on the house, or could the fines and regulation prove to be the double zero for many operators? I'm your host, Robin Lycka, Solutions Architect at Strise, and in this episode we're asking, is the gambling industry set for an AML wake-up call? We'll be discussing the current challenges facing the gambling or gaming space, what AMLA's involvement will change, and is the industry prepared for what's coming around the corner? To dive into this topic, I'm delighted to be joined from Helsinki by Sam Stenius, Head of AML at PAF. PAF is the government-owned Nordic gaming company operating under the same of the most demanding compliance standards in Europe. I'm going to do that again. PAF is the government-owned Nordic gaming company operating under some of the most demanding compliance standard in Europe. Welcome to The Laundry, Sam. I hear that you might be a regular Laundry listener.
Thank you so much. Yes, that is true. I think I picked up The Laundry the first time about a year ago in Stockholm, when it was the Penningtvättsdagarna conference, and I think it was one of the episodes that was recorded live over there. So that's when I first heard about The Laundry and been a listener since that.
Perfect. Let's dive into the discussion. So let's start by looking at the current challenges facing the gambling sector when it comes to AML regulation and financial crime. So what does the typical day look like for those in AML at a gambling or gaming organization?
To be honest, I don't think they vary that much from, let's say, someone working in a bank or in the financial sector. I mean, we very much in the same way have our alerts and rules and cases that we investigate. So when we come in the morning, we take a look at which alerts we have to handle and take forward. When we basically, in the same way as the financial sector, we also follow strict regulations. So we need to know what our customers are doing and also report to the authorities. So I don't think it probably varies that much in the end from a regular or I don't think it varies that much from how you would think a AML person in a bank's day looks like.
Okay. But PAF is a bit of an unusual player in this space. It's publicly owned, the profit goes back to society, and you've had mandatory loss limits in place long before most commercial operators took them seriously. So does that kind of culture of accountability give PAF a head start on AML, do you think?
Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't say we're basically an atypical gaming company if you compare to the rest of the world, and sustainability has been definitely a core focus for us as a company. I mean, from you mentioned our loss caps and our responsible gaming efforts, AML as a central core part, but then also sustainability and, let's say, in more ecological issues is also one big part of how PAF operates. And for instance, our head offices in Mariehamn on the Åland Islands is covered in solar panels. So just as one way for us to show, let's say, the more ecological part also of how PAF operates. But when you said do we get a head start, I would definitely say so, because in many situations we've already taken a lot of the steps in regulation, both from a responsible gaming perspective, but also from an AML perspective, that probably a lot of companies will have difficulties to do in the future.
Mm-hmm. And so what does a money laundering attempt look like through a gambling platform in practice, like the cases that wouldn't show up on a bank's radar?
First thing is speed. If you look at the gambling sector, basically what is a core function is the speed of from registration to your first deposit to the moment you get to play your first games. This happens within minutes. So the registration takes 60 seconds, and from that, when your first deposit is made, you're probably 1.5 minutes in. And basically you can play for a bit, you can withdraw, and then in theory, you could already have laundered funds. And after that, you can basically jump to the next operator. If you look at Nordic markets in Sweden, I think we're looking at 50 or something licensed companies. Don't quote me on that number, but basically we're tens of licensed operators, and basically you could jump between licensed operators with just a few minutes and do the same action. So this, of course, shows the speed that you can move funds between different operators, and then also basically use what you've done with the previous operator as proof of source of funds with the next operator.
Mm-hmm. So the most common modus operandi is layering technique with
yes.
That's already digitally mature funds, where you can defend the origin by saying that it came from gambling profits.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And are there other kind of common modus operandi that you could share?
There are classical ones of let's say poker, which is a well-known product that has been used for laundering, basically chip dumping or and in that way, basically.
Tell us for us uneducated poker players, what is chip dumping?
So basically, you will lose. You will have someone else who sits at the same table with you. It's of course always easier to do in an online setting. So you come in with chips bought with let's say stolen funds or funds you want to launder. You join a poker table with someone who helps you, and basically you lose all your chips to that person, who then collects the chips, withdraws them, and moves on.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically at the same time taken a layering step, but you've also transferred the funds over to the next person, who then can claim that I've just won these in a poker game.
Interesting. And is there currently any natural way to monitor this, or what kind of efforts are the gambling platforms doing to monitor those kind of scenarios?
There are quite a lot of these models that follow your activity and your action to basically try to identify this type of action in a poker table, so that basically those funds could be, in the best case scenario, it could be stopped during the actual chip dumping process, but if nothing else, be able to basically stop before they are withdrawn. Mm-hmm. But it's quite a lot to do with both following like the methodology of how you are acting, and then at the same time also, the other KYC checks are just as important. Knowing who it is, who your customer is, where the funds are coming from that they are depositing are all equally important in this. But then to actually also follow this specific product is quite important.
Yeah, you must speak to a lot of colleagues, like industry peers at events and conferences. So, what are while we're on this topic of modus operandi, what are the problems or challenges that come up again and again in the off the record chats at Penningtvettdagarna or these conferences?
Depends quite a lot on the market. I mean, we see variations between the different markets of what it is that it is discussed. I mean, in some markets you see match fixing as issues, and basically the more you see that betting becomes more of a global sport. I mean, the match fixing might not happen in the market you are in, but you're able to bet on something which happens in, let's say, Thailand or in Africa or whatever. Basically, so because it is global, the match fixing happens somewhere else, but you're able to bet on it in the market where you are. But then there's also quite a lot of discussion on perhaps not of the modus itself within the gambling platform or the games platform, but also on the focus on what you might see basically outside. What type of moduses you see, let's say like mule accounts can be raised quite a lot, where someone for a small sum of money asks if they can use if you can open an account on a gambling site and then funnel the funds through your mule account. And after that, they basically say that you can keep a small sum of money if you transfer this money to your gaming account and perhaps play a few games and then withdraw it and pay it forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because the topics you mention here, if we think about chip dumping, match fixing, that's the gambling regulator's expertise. But if you pull in layering techniques or money mules, that's the financial regulator's expertise. And perhaps one of the issues here is that gambling or gaming companies are in fact regulated by the gambling authority and not the Financial Conduct Authority, whereas AMLA itself has acknowledged this fragmentation to be a core problem that it was set up to solve. So how much of the quality of supervision do you think varies across the jurisdictions that you've seen?
I would say it varies quite a lot. And it depends quite a lot on the regulator. We see the regulators which are more stick than carrot type of regulators. Then we see regulators who are more open to work together with the gaming sector, basically try to reach a point where both parties are happy with the action that are taken, and more while also being a supervisor, but also basically trying to work together to push the market towards the right direction. We also see differences in local legislation, which are quite dramatic. This is a small thing, but let's say generally in the EU, you might say the retention period for data in the legislation is 5 years, but in Spain it is 10 years. And this is, it's not a huge difference, but it is still something you have to take into account depending on which market you are active in. And basically also what type of information the regulator wants to bring in. You have some regulators who work with guidelines, more of a soft approach. And then you have those who are willing to legislate or regulate quite a lot more harshly.
Interesting. So from your insider's perspective, does the industry need this AML shakeup?
I would say it's a yes and no question. So I would say it depends quite a lot on the market. We have markets who are further along. What we see, for instance, up in Northern Europe or in the Nordics, where the societies already are quite technologically advanced and basically take or use quite a lot of technology to our advantage, I would say that the regulation actually will affect us less than, for instance, in markets where document verification still might be on the level where you actually verify a copy of a passport, for instance, or might use a third party to verify the document. But there's quite the big difference in the markets. And I would say that there are parts of the regulation which definitely will do good for areas around Europe where I think the regulation will push them towards the right direction. And this perhaps wouldn't happen without the regulation. But then there are, at the same time, the gambling sector is very regulated, one of the more regulated sectors in Europe. So I don't think that, the gambling sector generally already knows how to follow compliance.
At a public hearing session back in March, AMLA invited questions from the organizations they would be regulating, and there was some pretty big questions raised from the European Gaming and Betting Association. So let's dive into those first. If we start with identity verification, the new rules assume operators will use digital ID solutions that don't yet exist at scale across all of Europe. And gambling operators are already using national systems like Bank ID in Denmark or It's Me in Belgium. We have a vast majority of the Nordic countries already have EID schemes. But what about outside of where these schemes are established? Is AMLA counting on a solution that is currently a patchwork of local solutions?
I wouldn't perhaps say so. The regulation does allow for the traditional ID document verification, even if it is an online perspective. But you can clearly see that that's where they're trying to push the I would say not only, of course, the gambling market. Europe as a whole, but we have the EIDAS or the EU ID, which is coming into, which should be in place by, I think, December, which I think will help quite a lot of markets who haven't perhaps been where like electronic identity verification hasn't been that prevalent. So I think that one will help quite a lot. And the regulation also, it does point a bit into the direction of what type of identity verification tools you can use and what you can't. But personally, I think that especially the EU ID, I have to take that. EIDAS, thank you. EIDAS will help quite a lot in the markets. In markets where we don't see EIDs.
Does the gaming industry worry about onboarding friction in this aspect?
Well, I personally think that the friction will be less with the use of an electronic ID. Once it has been implemented, of course, it should be less friction than, let's say, a worst case scenario where you have someone looking through an ID document, a copy of an ID document, even though that's perhaps not as common anymore, but we still know that there are small operators who use this, that you send in a PDF or a photo of your ID and you verify with that. But if we look at third-party vendors where you have these biometric tools and the ID verification, that one also takes time. So I think that once it is in place and customers are used to using an electronic identity system, I think the friction will actually be quite a lot lower than it is right now. But in the transition period, possibly there would be some type of friction. That I would say possibly, yes.
Yeah, I guess it's not only limited to friction in the actual identification, but also friction in asking the right questions. So there were some concerns raised about asking these pointless or unhelpful questions, like the purpose or intended nature when you open a gambling account. Clearly, you're not investing. It's
No.
or you might think that you're investing.
Yes.
So, do you share this concern on asking these sort of, well, if you look at the intention, probably a pointless question?
I would say I actually don't share it. I mean, when we look at the purpose, I mean, of course, as you said, I mean, you're not investing. You are registering because you want to. It's a recreational reason why you are registering. Even though I know there are people out there whose livelihood come from gaming and might be considered to be a professional gambler in this case, which of course is another type of purpose. But I think the more of the idea what they're trying to look at here is that gaming companies should in beforehand understand who they are onboarding as a customer. Is it someone who is spending, let's say, 20 euros every Friday because they think it's fun to play a bit of slot games, or 10 euros every Saturday because they want to bet on Premier League matches or something like that? Or is it someone who will be more intensive in their activity and basically can already then create a risk profile of the customer? And then when you start to see deviations from that risk profile, then you know that you can take the next steps to investigate that customer. I would see that this is these type of understanding the customer relationship. I mean, there is, from an AML perspective, a clear usage for it. But that's actually something that gaming companies have been doing already for a long time from the responsible gambling perspective, where you ask your customers to set your loss limits. This is how much I am ready to lose within a specific time period, let's say a month, or this is how much I will deposit and feel comfortable in depositing within that same time period. So I don't actually think that there's a big difference. We're just basically moving it from a responsible gaming or responsible gambling view more towards an AML view, and it used the same information to build an AML risk profile.
Interesting. So, switching up the topic a bit, what do you think CEOs think about these new rules? I'm thinking like in the commercial-driven gaming or gambling companies.
Oh, that's a good question. The new regulation is a lot more rule-based than risk-based if we compare to the previous regulation, which of course means that following rules will, or I mean, the rules that you need to follow and the questions you need to ask, they will have a cost, of course. So there might be actors out there who consider this cost to be too much, or that it cuts profit too much. I usually look at this instead of in that way, that let's say if a gaming company is compliant and follows the regulation and will not be fined, they've actually saved that money from not being fined. And hopefully also they're gaining customers because they want to work with trustworthy operators. So instead of seeing this new regulation as a cost or as a difficulty, I think you should basically try to turn it over more to your strength, to show that we are a trustworthy company, we follow the regulation, we are really interested to make sure that we are interested about our reputation as a operator in the market, and therefore we will also focus on following these rules as well as we can.
And from Puff's perspective, what are you currently doing to prepare for July 2027? What's the thing that you're most uncertain about at this point?
There's been quite a lot of these RTS, regulatory technical standard documents that AMLA has published for public consultation.
Yeah.
And we've been focusing quite a lot on those because they help also understand the regulation more clearly. And I think that is something that probably everyone who right now works with the AMLR will be focused on.
Yeah, the RTS and the ITS.
Yes. And then what I'm mostly worried about is actually has to do a bit with the data points which come as new KYC data points. We're talking about nationality and place of birth, for instance, which are usually information that they might exist in a census agency, but otherwise they usually are, let's say, in passport documentation or something like that, but they are not usually information you get from electronic identification. And that's basically in the markets where we at least been working, where electronic identification is the go-to way of working. That type of, let's say, extra friction that comes into the onboarding part, which, let's say, in a worst case scenario, it stops a onboarding from happening because someone basically would like to quickly onboard. They can't find their passport. They can't send in a copy of it, or we can't verify it any other way. So those type of questions it's perhaps more of it's partially business, but it is still a part which I think is worrying, that we will add these data points, but then not allow companies in the market to have tools to actually get that information easily or verify that data easily.
Yeah. Do you think AMLA has been speaking enough with non-financial players that are about to fall under this regulation?
I don't think they've had time yet to do it. My guess is that, or from what I've heard, they are still perhaps not exactly where they should be. I mean, they still have quite a lot to do, and I think the ones they've right now been discussing with are more the actors in the financial sector. We've heard that they have reached out to some supervisors or regulators in the markets where we are active, but I haven't actually heard anything if they've had these discussions yet with the regulators or what basically what they've discussed.
Yeah. And we're looking at a deadline for all of this, July 27, just over a year away now. If you had to be honest, is the gambling industry going to be ready in time?
Once again, a yes and no. I think there will be areas of the gambling market in Europe that will not be ready. We touched on it already earlier with electronic identification, but there are the areas where you don't have electronic identification in place, who I think will have. They might be ready for some parts of the regulation, but let's say the identification might not be. Then I think again in the Nordics, at least, I don't see a big issue with the gambling market being ready. And also, if you look at, as we talked about it, the gambling market is already quite regulated. So we, as a market, are used to the fact that regulation changes and we need to follow the regulation. So in that way, there's already a bit of a, let's say, trained readiness for regulation changes within the gambling sector, at least for the bigger companies. Then we have small companies, and those might be then a different thing. There are companies in the market where AML is one person. The whole second line is one person. The first line might be a small customer support team. And that is basically the AML organization. And those companies, again, might be completely out of this, out of the scope. And there's been basically a small fear that I've had is that these type of companies basically decide not to follow the regulation at all, So they will both drop out from the regulated markets from gambling perspective and drop their get the licenses in those markets and basically just drop out completely and become an unregulated entity that will not, it won't follow the AML regulation, it won't follow local legislation, it won't pay taxes into the market, to the country where it operates. And that is a slight fear I have, that we will see these small companies who will basically start dropping out.
Yeah, I can tell you from me personally, I'm a terrible procrastinator. So if I was an MLRO in a gaming company, I'd say, this is a problem for future Robin. And then I'd start dealing with it like probably Q2 2027. And I guess like what one of the things that I'm thinking about is the actual wake-up call when we see the first major fine within the gaming or gambling sector. And when do you
that is possible.
When do you think that we'll see one of the regulators issuing a fine for a gaming or gambling company?
I would be really surprised if someone is that cruel that it would happen within 2027. I would think that.
So you think we have a 6-month grace period of the July date?
I would say I would hope so, that there is that type of, because the issue is that we're now talking about the gambling market. Will that be ready? But also, I mean, we have a lot of regulators who will also right now have issues in being ready in time to follow. They basically need the risk assessments the regulators need to create with the new AMLR and the AMLA regulation are quite extensive versus what they have been doing today. So the grace period most likely will be because the regulators will be struggling to be ready by July 27.
Okay. Before we end this episode, we're going to dish out some quick fire questions for you. Are you ready?
Yes.
What's the biggest misconception that gambling operators have about what AMLA compliance actually requires?
I would say that the biggest is that it's that everything, that you need to do everything. I think that if you start reading, if you look at the AMLR, it's a big bunch of pages and lots of text to read. But once you start splitting it, you'll notice that it is actually, there are sectors which doesn't affect the gambling sector, which are clearly meant only to be for crypto providers, financial sector, football clubs, whatever. So basically start splitting it to smaller pieces. Or, I mean, you'll notice it's not as heavy as you think it is from the beginning.
Does the gaming industry have a money laundering issue?
Yes and no. The regulated part, I would say, has less and less of a money laundering issue. The unregulated part, 100%. So the regulated part, as we said, I mean, we've been regulated for years, and gaming companies need to prove, and we are audited all the time, that we are compliant with the current regulation. So I would say in the regulated sector, it gets lower and lower the AML risk or the AML issue. At the same time, we have gambling companies around the world where you can find the URL, you need an email address, you create your account with just the email address, and you can deposit, let's say, 100,000 euros, which your first deposit, and no one will ever ask a question. So, yes and no.
Yes and no. What's the one piece of advice you would give to your compliance peers today?
If you haven't started looking at the AMLR, please start looking at it right now.
Is the gambling or gaming industry set for an AML wake-up call? Yes or no?
I'm going to go out on a limb and still say actually no. And I think we will, maybe I'm naive, but I think the sector will be ready in time for the AMLR.
I'm glad to hear that. That brings this spin of the laundry to an end. Sam, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find and connect with you?
They can find me on my LinkedIn page. So search for my name and they will find me.
Perfect. Thank you all for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, check out the back catalog of more than 160 episodes and follow The Laundry on your podcast platform of choice. Please share the podcast on your social media channels. Tell a colleague to subscribe. Maybe give us a 5-star rating. It really helps people to find us. Got something you want to share with us? Comment on the Strise LinkedIn, my LinkedIn, or email laundry@strise.ai. Your host for this episode was me, Robin. Our producer was Matthew. Our editor was Dominic. And our video was by Loïs. The Laundry is proudly produced by Strise, the autonomous fin crime department. Visit strise.ai for more information and see you next time.